Linda's purse was stolen when she left a coffee shop, but luckily, a homeless man collided with the robber and returned her things. He rejected her offer for money in exchange and left. That night, she told her father what happened and noticed the homeless man in a picture on his desk. Then she realized the shocking truth. Bye, everyone. 16-year-old Linda told her friends while exiting a cafe. She rummaged through her purse for her phone to call her driver, although the whole idea of not being able to drive on her own still made her angry. Her father, Frank, was overprotective and had hired someone instead of giving her a car. But before Linda could make that call, a young man on a bicycle snatched her purse and drove off. "Oh! Stop that thief," she yelled at no one in particular but pointed her finger. People turned to see the robber, and suddenly, a man in tattered clothing launched himself at the bicycle. They collided on the floor, and several officers who had been at the same cafe caught the robber. "Who is this?" Linda said, turning the frame around so her dad could see it. The man approached Linda with her purse and gave it to her with an awkward smile. She looked him up and down, realizing he had to be homeless, and thanked him for his bravery. "Please, take this," she offered, taking a $50 bill out of her purse. "Would you like something to eat? I can buy you something." The man stared at her for a long time. He was looking at her face as if he knew her. His eyes squinted, and Linda smiled, encouraging him to take her offer. But eventually, he snapped out of his thoughts, shook his head, and rejected her request. "No, young lady. I have no place among wealthy people," he muttered and walked away. Linda tried to call out to him, but he continued walking, and his words made her frown. No place among wealthy people. What does that mean? She asked herself, raising her phone to her ear and calling her driver at last. During the car ride home, she mulled over the homeless man's words and concluded that he must have been treated poorly by wealthier people. He probably noticed how well-dressed Linda was and thought she was like that. The idea made her sad, but there was nothing she could do about it. She resolved to find him again someday and give him something to eat as a thank you for returning her purse. The car arrived at her house, and she got out, forgetting all about that issue for a while. That night, she decided to enter her father's office and tell him what happened. Maybe he was right to be overprotective. Perhaps, instead of just a driver, she needed a bodyguard. Her dad was a well-known businessman in Houston, and her family had always been affluent. Frank raised his eyes from his computer and saw Linda entering his office. "Darling," he said, standing up from his desk and extending his arms while approaching her for a big hug. Linda returned the gesture and spoke up. "Dad, I need to tell you something." By the time she finished recounting what happened, her dad was pacing the office, agitated. "I knew this. I knew it was dangerous for you to go out on your own. See? Never complain about that driver again, and I'm going to ask him if he wants more responsibilities. He might be a good bodyguard for you." Linda sat down at his desk and watched him as he continued pacing. He was still talking about her safety, but it was more to himself than for her benefit. She stared at all the paperwork on his desk, and something caught her attention. There were several picture frames in his work area, but Linda grabbed one in particular. "Dad, who is this?" "What?" he asked, stopping his pacing and frowning at her. "Who is this?" Linda said, turning the frame around so he could see it. "Oh, that's Simon, my brother. I told you about him, briefly," Frank answered, pain lacing his voice. Linda frowned, turned the frame back, and stared intensely at the picture. She knew it was him. "Dad, this is the man that got my purse back." "The homeless man." "Darling, that's impossible. Simon disappeared long ago." "It couldn't be him," Frank replied, shaking his head. Frank rushed toward Simon and gave him a tight hug. "Bro," he said as if he was a still kid, and Simon embraced his big brother reluctantly. After that touching reunion, Frank insisted on bringing Simon to their home, although he tried to refuse several times. However, Linda's dad was insistent, and no one could say no to him. They settled Simon in a room, gave him fresh clothing, and he had a shower before dinner. All of them, including Frank's wife, Laura, sat down to eat. It was quiet at first, but Linda finally broke the ice. "I need to know what happened. The curiosity is killing me. I've heard a few things about it, but the story was that you disappeared." "Honey," her mother scolded gently. "No, she's right. We all have a right to know the truth. What happened, Simon? Where were you all these years? Frank asked, curiosity and fear in his voice. Perhaps he didn't want to know the answer at all. Simon put down his cutlery and stared at all of them. I left for Virginia when you two started dating, he answered. What? Frank blurted, almost spitting his food. I was so jealous that you started dating a wonderful woman like Lara, and I couldn't deal with it. Maybe I was also jealous that she stole you away. But those feelings mixed with resentment because our family name had haunted me our entire lives. I wanted to be my own man, make my way in the world, do something for myself. So I left. I wasn't successful. One thing led to another, and I ended up on the streets, Simon explained. That doesn't make any sense. You didn't have to leave home for that, and why didn't you come back when things got rough? Frank asked, shocked at the insane story Simon was telling them. I don't know. I think it was pride. I was convinced you guys would turn me away after I disappeared without a word. I was stupid. I returned to Houston because I had a friend here who offered me his couch for a while. But he kicked me out eventually, Simon continued. Linda couldn't believe that story either. Her family was wealthy, and he had been gone for decades at that point. He could have returned, but his pride prevented it. Frank stared at him thoughtfully, as if weighing his next questions. Are you ready to come home now? Or are you going to disappear again? I'm ready, his little brother answered, nodding his head. I'm so sorry. It was the stupidest thing I've ever done. I can't believe I didn't come home as soon as I returned to Houston. I don't know what was going in my head. Frank patted his shoulder, pursing his lips as if he was holding his tears. It's fine, bro. Everything's all right now, he comforted. They changed the subject after that and continued eating. Linda was sure that her father probably yelled at Simon later when they were alone. Their entire family thought he was dead or had been kidnapped. That's why Frank was so paranoid about Linda's safety. But he had disappeared as an adult, and the police never did much despite how influential their family could be. They now had the answers even if his actions didn't make sense. Sometimes, people hold too much pride and don't know how to rectify their mistakes. What can we learn from this story? You might regret impulsive actions all your life. Simon did something stupid and regretted it for decades, but he didn't dare to make things right until Frank found him. Your family's safety is a priority. Frank believed that his brother was kidnapped or worse, so he was so concerned about his daughter's safety. But any parent thinks about his family's safety above everything else.